Questions, and I call on Deputy Michael Martin. Deputy Martin, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you indeed. I'll ask Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, St Gabriel's Special School in Bishopstown in Cork provides education for 43 special needs children with a very severe and profound diagnosis with autism. So intellectual disability with autism, probably the most severe and profound in the system being catered for in education. These are children who should be our #1 priority, but they're being neglected by the government in terms of their need for a new school building. The parents say, and have said, that we feel forgotten. The existing school building has huge issues. It's substandard. Bathrooms not big enough to fit in wheelchairs, no hot running water, leaking roof, no dedicated toilets for children with medical needs, lack of infection control. The sensory room is in an outbuilding, windowless outbuilding, and I could go on. The parents are now crowdfunding for 200,000. So parents of a school of 43 severe and profound are going out there now to raise €200,000 to basically make the school habitable, to carry out some repairs. Now that school is illustrative of many other schools across the country, both special schools and mainstream primary schools across the country. Because parents all over the country are raising money to keep schools going in terms of day-to-day expenditure. The capitation grant, quite simply, is not anywhere near sufficient to meet the costs of running a school. According to the Chief Inspector's report, spending per pupil in Ireland is less than the European Union or OECD average, and according to a recent Grant Thornton report, the capitation grant now covers about 52% of the cost of running a school, and depending on small, medium or large. But in all cases, we're looking at situations where the capitation is way below what is actually necessary. I think the average capitation grant of 46,000 in 2016 was clearly insufficient to meet the average general expenditure costs of about 91,000. This is the heating, all the basic operational costs. Voluntary schools at secondary level are in a similar situation. Visited a number of secondary level schools recently. Maintenance costs, big issue for them, and an inability to have the day-to-day resources to meet that. Now, Taoiseach, the programme for government has a commitment to multi-annual increases in capitation grants and funding for schools under a number of headings, but it hasn't been implemented. Now, last year we did force the government on the pupil-teacher ratio as part of confidence and supply, but the government was resistant on capitation for some reason. And I would say there are 3 ways that could bring some ease to schools. One is to have a commit in the next budget to a phased increase in the capitation rate for schools. 2, that the minor works grant scheme would be a permanent feature as a non-discretionary payment by government paid out to the schools, and that statutory would be provided for as an annual, not just if we may do it next year, we might do it the following year. And similarly, summer work schemes should be annual and should be fixed so that schools could plan with some degree of certainty as to income that would help them to meet the day-to-day running costs, repair costs and maintenance costs of schools.
3 minutes. Thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle. This year, the government will invest €10 billion in education, the highest spending in education ever in the history of the state. In fact, it's €1 billion more being spent in education this year than when this government of Fine Gael and the Independent Alliance of Independence came to office. And that is money well spent. It is taxpayers' money invested in our children, invested in our education, giving them the best opportunities in life, and also ensuring that they can access the best jobs when they grow up and become adults. And that involves a lot of investment in school buildings as well. I can't comment on the individual case that you raise, but I do know that we have seen an enormous amount of new school building all around the country. My own constituency, a very rapidly developing area, has had a number of new schools built, secondary schools and primary schools, and the quality of those buildings is really excellent when you see them. And I've seen around the country extensions built all over the country. If you take large projects, for example, since 2011, 340 large projects have been delivered and 175,000 additional school places have been provided, recognising the growth in our population and the demographic bulge that exists. We have 6,000 extra teachers working in our education system, 3,000 extra SNAs. We now invest more in special education than we do in higher education. We have 150 new ASD units being provided per year, which is enormous investment as well. And as you mentioned, the pupil-teacher ratio has been reduced. In terms of capitation, yes, there is a commitment in the programme for government to increase capitation in the next number of years, and also there's a commitment in the action plan for education to do the same. But even the wealthiest countries, even countries that are doing well economically as we are, can't do everything we would like to do in any one year. And when it comes to capital projects, new schools, refurbishments and extensions, it has always been the case, and it will always be the case, that there will be a pipeline of projects. It's never possible to do every project this year. It's never possible to do everything you would like to do in education or health or anything else like that in any given year. You have to prioritise. And last year in particular, we prioritised new schools where they were needed, increasing teacher numbers, reducing the pupil-teacher ratio, introducing new subjects like PE and computer science. And of course, as part of the budget, which is now 5 months away, we will consider an increase in capitation in line with what's committed in the programme for government. But I would also ask the main opposition party to tell us what your priorities are too, because I hear your education spokesperson one day demanding more spending on new school buildings, the next day demanding full restoration or full pay equality for young teachers, the next day demanding an increase in capitation. All that doesn't add up, and you know as well as I do that all those things can't be delivered in 1 year. So which is your priority? What would Fianna Fáil put first? Would it be capitation? Would it be capital spending for new schools? Would it be pay equalisation for new teachers? Because it can't be all three of those. What's your priority?
Actually, we put our priorities into the confidence and supply. And the reduction in pupil-teacher ratio wouldn't have happened if it wasn't put into the confidence and supply. And you guys resisted it, just as you resisted the National Treatment Purchase Fund. Likewise with postgraduate grants, you guys resisted that. We put that into the confidence and supply. And the same in terms of career guidance, ex-quota career guidance counsellors. There would have been no movement on career guidance counselling in this country if I didn't insist that that went into the confidence and supply agreement, despite your objections. But Taoiseach, I'm not interested in a tit-for-tat between who does what better, because the pupils or the parents of the 43 kids who were severe and profound diagnosis of intellectual disability with autism, they don't want the 10 billion figure thrown at them. They want a new school. They want a sense that somebody is listening to them, is aware of them. Because right now, they have no such sense. I've met them. And that's the problem, Taoiseach. This isn't about a debating chamber saying, I'll do it better than you'll do it. This is about responding to real need that is out there. Last week, there was a publication of a list of, I don't know how many, 42 new schools. There's 2 announced in Cork that no one knows. No one went looking for. Yet this school is around for 3 or 4 years looking for a new school building. It's on no goddamn list. Do you understand the frustration, Taoiseach, that parents have out on the ground when they're faced with this kind of a juxtaposition of fantasy lists being published? We're going to build new schools somewhere in 3 or 4 years' time, and we can't even get around to having habitable conditions for children who are diagnosed with severe and profound intellectual disability. And my point is, Taoiseach, you want to know our priorities? Last year we said pupil-teacher ratio, and we said capitation. Capitation is possible. What I believe it is absolutely now unsustainable for schools to survive and to meet their ongoing day-to-day running costs from the amount they're getting in capitation grant. It's a very simple point, and I think it's a valid point. You acknowledged it in your programme for government 3 years ago, but have not implemented it.
First of all, Deputy, the constant supply agreement was not resisted, it was agreed. It was a negotiation, and as is the case in any negotiation, you try to agree what is possible, and you try to cut your cloth to meet its measure. And what is wholly dishonest in politics is going around the country promising every interest group that you will do everything they ask, and you'll do it this year, because that is not that is not possible. Because that's what your party is doing, Deputy.
without interruption.
That's what your party is doing, Deputy.
Taoiseach without interruption. It's the leader and the Taoiseach.
The truth, as is always the case, the truth hurts. And that is what your party is doing, Deputy. And I'm keeping a record of this as the weeks go by. All of the things your spokespeople are promising. Hundreds of millions in extra spending every week for every interest group. And you're promising it all now. And that's exactly the kind of philosophy that landed this country in the hole that we had to take it out of a number of years ago. But we have delivered. We've delivered on the pupil-teacher ratio, on the guidance counsellors, on the extra teachers, on pay restoration and on the extra schools. And also, I do welcome the Deputy's clarity on this, that capitation is their priority in education spending and not the other promises the Deputy Byrne has been making to other groups in education. But one thing I do disagree with you on. It is actually important that we do plan for new schools in 4 or 5 years' time, and the Department of Education under this government is much better at planning for schools than it used to be, because we now look at demographics, we now look at child benefit, and I remember very well, Ascan Corla.
Deputies, please.
I remember very well, Ascan Corla, when I was.
Deputies, please. I'm going to move on. Deputy
when I was in opposition, and we had to set up an emergency school 1 September, Skull Cullum, an emergency school in prefabs 1 September.
You'll have to find another way of having this debate.
Precisely because they did not plan 3 and 4 years ahead. We need to plan 3 and 4 years ahead.
But both say, sorry, if we want debate,
and it's disturbing that
if we want debate, if the leader, sorry, Deputy, sorry, Taoiseach, same rule applies to you. That if we want a longer debate between the Taoiseach and the leader of Fianna Fáil, then you'll have to find another way. But this doesn't apply. It's a 3-minute one. Deputy McDonald.